just the first heat here of our age sow division, and man, if the rest of what's to come in this particular age group is anywhere near as good as what we've seen in this first heat, then we're in for a real treat in the age sow division, because we've got 6 individuals here that I'll tell you what, I probably took the longest amount of time for deliberation as I have of anything today, because I think there's quality all the way through, and honestly one of those classes that as a show judge makes you feel a little bit bad for the ones that still maintain the amount of quality these do that have to end up on the bottom half of these placings. That being said, there is one that hit me exceptionally hard to start us off with in this class. I like entry number 50. Just truly a sow built like a Mack truck. And I mean, so good in so many areas. As that one comes to us, that's possibly the widest in terms of their chest, the squarest in their knee, and the most base width we've seen up front of any particular individual today. I think truly impressive in that regard. We study her from her chest on back. I mean, awesome to me in terms of just her top line composure, near perfect in terms of her spine balance, and yet as a heavy-centered, obviously mature type of sow, maintains her underlying composure, maintains her flesh level very appropriately for where we're at here. Hip and rear skeleton just as good as what we've discussed up front. Width is fantastic. Power off of the backside of her hip is very good. One of the heaviest featured, heaviest footed individuals we've found in this particular group lands in first there, in a very good type of animal. Second in this particular drive is entry number 51, and to me, this is one that offers some similarities we can draw a line to versus our class winner there in terms of the front 2/3 of their body. Those are both incredibly appropriate type of gilts in terms of the angle of their shoulder, the set and comfort and cushion of their ankle and their front foot up front, and their usage in terms of their step and reach as they go. Great gilts and great sows in terms of rib shape and body composure, like we've talked already. Appropriately fit, appropriately fleshed. We step in behind this this sow, and I think we can draw maybe just a bit more critique in terms of balance there. She is just a bit steeper in terms of where her tail head wants to sit into her, and thus doing so wants to round and fall off the back of her hip just a bit steeper and sharper than our class winner. Allow her to read just a bit more balanced, a bit more powerful off that rear skeleton, and we can make that conversation for first even more interesting, because that's a very good pair here we've got to start. My 1 and 3rd here, entry number 46, I'll be the first to admit, isn't one that maybe patterns up or looks the same as what the other two in terms of general size and stature, type and kind. This was a sow that impressed me specifically just in terms of her condition she was in terms of her walking. She's walking on straight gravel out there. Those are big rocks, and trust me, I've raised hogs for a good portion of my life, and those type of tender feet and hooves and pads don't always appreciate sharper gravel. So for this gilt to handle herself so elegantly, be able to take that type of step and stride and still maintain some squareness and comfort level there, I thought was particularly impressive. Now, is she the biggest in terms of her kind of this particular drive? Is she the boldest, the broadest, the stoutest? Probably not. But I think merit value alone in terms of comfort level, flexibility, and where she falls in that category, I thought we needed to get her worked up towards the top end of this class. I thought 3rd was the right place there. Very nice type of hog there. 4th place individual is entry number 47. And to me, this is one that presents a bit more of a challenge. She's obviously lactating. She's obviously carrying a workload. That's what we need to see out of these age sows. They're not just yard ornaments. They're there to raise pigs and do things of a production nature, which is why we've kept them around this long and why they get to don the name sow. They put in the work. They've had litters. They've raised generations. This one is obviously still in good flesh for I'm assuming milking a litter, and if not, about to pig there, and still appropriate for me. I appreciate that about her. The front 2/3 of her body are very good. She's a bit shorter muzzled, a bit shorter faced, still got a great hair coat on her there. For me, where we begin to study her is and critique a bit more is off the rear third of her body. She's the shortest hipped option. She kind of wants to hinge and tie up underneath herself in terms of her step. Maybe doesn't want to extend off the rear portion of that stride just quite as well as what we found in a few of the others there. She is the steeper hipped, rounder rumped option there of that initial 4, and that's what sorts her into this area. Hey, I'm here to tell you, I understand she's not at the same advantages that maybe some of these other have. She is very full in terms of her underline. She's very good in terms of her teat quality. I love that about her. For me today, not quite as comfortable as a few of the others we found in this particular drive here. Her fifth place individual, entry number 48, to me is one of those that could read very similar to our second place individual there, just in terms of type and kind and stature there. To me, this is one that wanted to swivel the most out of her step. She wants to become just a bit more uncoordinated in terms of her stride. She wants to become just a little bit rounder in terms of her type there. But, I think one that, in terms of some power, in terms of some fundamentals we need to find in terms of the Kuni sows and, what they need to look like at this stage of the game, I still think a very good type of hog there in its own right. To round out with, we got an interesting one, and that's entry number 49. I'll be the first to admit there's pieces of this sow that I think are as intriguing as any in this class. That is bar none the broadest hind leg, the biggest bone in terms of circumference, the stoutest featured one that maybe we've seen today so far in the female show. And I think the depth of her heel, just the size and scope of her hind leg and rear foot are very good and intriguing. To me, obviously another one that falls into that category of, obviously she's lactating heavy. Obviously she's milking. She's doing a job. She's maybe not, quite as loose and limber as what we'd like to find. And I think that kind of works to her detriment versus a few others that, read just a bit more comfortable today. To me, this particular sow is the tightest in terms of her spine. She's the most restricted in terms of her hip usage, and in doing so shortens the most in terms of her step off of her rear skeleton. But like I said, certainly an awesome type of sow to have. Very, very fun to look at in terms of added feature and a big, heavy base built within that sow. Good type of individual. Very, very good class here, top to bottom. My congratulations and hats off to those breeders. Good second heat here of our age sow division, and perhaps a heat that presents a few more problems, a few more talking points and questions we can bring up there. But nonetheless, I'm incredibly comfortable with my top pair here to start us off with, and to lead us off in winning heat 2, I like entry number 57. To me, that's the totals option of our age sow group here, and that's the one that's to me very good in terms of spread and power, very good in terms of look, and very good in terms of squareness. We asked her to come to us. She's one of the broader options in terms of her chest and where her front feet want to meet the ground. She leaves us adequate in terms of her width behind, in terms of her squareness and where her joints set within her. I think the totals option there and one we can land on pretty comfortably to start us off with here. I like entry number 52 here to go ahead and be second. And hey, if you want to say this is the higher motored, higher geared, quicker moving, more agile type of female, and you like that about her enough to move her into first place, and I'll hear that argument out, because I honestly went back and forth on these two. I thought what ultimately sorted that pair is as that sow comes to us. I read her just a bit more closed up in terms of her knee. Wants to toe out just a shot in terms of her foot set. Didn't read her just quite as secure, quite as consistent in terms of that view she had to offer us versus what her class winner. But hey, undoubtedly that one is so impressive in terms of rate of speed, in terms of comfort and athleticism, in terms of reach and stride. That one can go fast and go for days, I guess, in terms of those regards. A third place individual here, I think, is a very nice hog. That's entry number 56. And I'll be honest with you, harder maybe just to get a great read on in terms of foot size based off how far we are away from the camera there. I love the blonde hair coat on this one. I love just the added body and power and broodiness that this sow offers from a rib shape and maternal aspect there. A good power and good bone we can tell as she turns and goes from us. What we can't maybe get a read on and what we can kind of pick up hints on that kind of work to her detriment is mainly just her motion she wants to take out of her front shoulder. She kind of wants to pick up her front leg and her knee and kind of short step and stab just a little bit more. Not quite as elegant, not quite as smooth in terms of her movement pattern as the two that we place above her there. One that's awesome, though, in terms of skin and hair, power, maternal characteristic, all very good. A very nice third place individual there. Entry number 55 is going to go ahead and be fourth in this class. And to me, that's one that, in terms of step up front, in terms of her stride and how she wants to handle her shoulder, I think a good individual in that regard. We begin to fall into a bit more of an issue when we step in behind her. She wants to get just a bit wide-based in terms of where her hip wants to sit and where her hock wants to sit within her hip wall, a little bit out of bounds in terms of her step, and you can tell in terms of her movement pattern. In doing so, she wants to tighten in her stifle, she wants to tighten in her upper hip, just not quite as agile in terms of her step, or not quite as comfortable there. I need to make her a little bit better in that regard to move her up here. Dealer's choice here on 5th and 6th in this heat. I opted to go for 5th place with entry number 53. So I thought for me, albeit this is maybe one of the tighter moving, more restricted type of options we've got within there, that reads maybe just a bit laborsome, honestly, for my personal liking in terms of her movement. I can certainly appreciate that sow on the standstill. I thought her width, her added power, just her overall bulk was very, very good there. I asked her to go into motion. That's where we began to sort her on down the line there. And you're going to hear me critique some movement and some comfort. I understand these are aged sows. I understand they've done their job. They don't maybe have it as easy or, as some of the younger ones. They've been around on God's green earth there for just a little bit longer. So you're bound to have some soreness. You're bound to have some movement issues. I'm just able here to judge what's in front of me. Today, for me, I need to see her just a little bit looser. Same can be said with our sixth place individual. That's entry number 54. Kind of same condition there, maybe just opposite end of the skeleton where the problems arise. I read this one to just be, the most restricted in terms of her shoulder and her step up front there. Another one, though, powerful, beautiful skin and hair, beautiful hair coat, beautiful presentation value, feature, bone, power, width, body, spread, dimension, it's all there. We need to ask her to handle it just a little bit better whenever we get her in motion. Very good second heat here in your age sow division. Congratulations. I think an excellent heat to round us out in heat number 3 of our age sow division. A very easy class winner for me to start with, and that's entry number 60. And just a phenomenal type of female there. So hard to poke a hole in structurally. So good on the move, and yet, for this stage and age of life and where we're at here, reads so appropriate for me in terms of condition and body flesh, and looks like a sow that's performed and will perform and has many years of longevity left. And then we can factor in some extras there. She's beautifully maintained in terms of her hair coat, awesome in terms of her top line balance and composure, great in terms of feature, flawless on the move, and great in terms of her build. We could go on and on. I think a very nice female there to start us off in this particular class. Second place is entry number 59. And if you're a fan of power and stoutness and you want to give this one the nod to go ahead, then hey, I certainly will hear the argument there, because that is an overwhelming type of sow in this particular heat, just in terms of spread and dimension and body capacity there. Heavy featured, bold sprung in terms of her chest. I opted to go with maybe just a little more mobility, a little more athleticism in our class winner that still checked enough boxes there. If you want to maybe go more on the singular trait side of things and say, no, I need them broad, I need them stout, I need them powerful, then you can easily land on entry number 59. For me, didn't find her as graceful, didn't find her maybe just as quick about her step or as apt or as athletic as our class winner, but a very, very good type of individual, very unique in terms of the pieces she brings to the table. Entry number 63 is going to be third in this class. And to me, maybe one that wants to get maybe a little hard-headed. We don't get as good of a read on her in the video in terms of what her constant type of movement is or what her flow rate is as she goes and travels. But I thought her moderation, I thought her feature, her added comfort, and just her width off either end of her skeleton were good. She's a bit smaller statured for my liking as we get into this age sow division. She's a bit more compact, maybe not quite as tall or elevated off the ground. I would like to see sows that have a bit more age on them read just a bit more mature in terms of their overall size and scope, and I think that's where we get critical on our third place skill and why we can work her in there. But I thought her basic build and function fit just on par with those two above her that go ahead and start off on a very good trio of age sows in this class. Entry number 58 is going to be fourth, and to me, definitely a breed changer is what the term I'm going to put on her in terms of what she brings to the table there. That is a sow that is somewhat unlike most of the others we've seen today. That's one that is so tall at the point of her shoulder, it almost trends backwards in terms of her height and in terms of her elevation. She wants to run downhill, backwards, I guess, if you will, and kind of steepen and round off in her hip. Wants to get just a little bit tighter, a little bit more robotic in terms of her movement off of her rear skeleton, but it's so impressive in terms of height of shoulder, in terms of front end elevation, and still good in terms of chest and knee assembly and width as she comes to us. Just need to see her balance out just a bit better, but undeniably we can appreciate just the uniqueness that one offers in terms of her build. Fifth place in this class, entry number 61. Hey, from a body and composition perspective, I don't mind a lot about this sow. A little bit easier in terms of her spine. She's softer conditioned in terms of her belly and her underline there. Offers the right amount of flesh, offers the right amount of look and extension ahead of her shoulder. For me, I need to make her toe quality better. She's kind of a little bit longer in terms of her foot and longer in terms of her toes. Kind of wants to tie her up and wants to kind of inhibit her just a bit in terms of her movement pattern. Shorten those toes up, give them a good trim, and allow that gilt to just kind of move just a bit square and more comfortable. without dragging that much hoof with her, and I think we can move her up. Just need to see that fix in that one regard there. Entry number 62 is going to round us out. To me, a sow that obviously looks like she's been to work there. She's missing a little bit of hide and hair. Looks like she's maybe just got done raising a litter, if not currently doing so. Just reads a little bit harsher, and as we begin to study her structure, wants to fall out of balance in a few places, wants to maybe just get a little bit lopsided in terms of her hip structure, wants to rock forward and push forward in the set to her knee and her ankle there. Needed to just relax her in a couple angles and allow her to fill and flesh just a little bit smoother in her transition points, and allow her to leave us just a bit more comfortably in terms of her hip usage there. Good class all the way through. Congratulations. Well, a very good and very deep age sow division we've got, and bar none, our biggest group to work through for the day, and the most thought-provoking, I guess, through each of those heats in terms of quality and where your priorities lie. I'll be honest, so we get back out here for champion, and there's one that just fits the bill for me in terms of a totals type of hog. It's so good in terms of the look, the reach, the range of motion, having the right kind of power, and like we've talked in a few of these other respective heats, looking the role for their age and looking the part in terms of their maturity and as they should in terms of flesh and wear and tear, taking all things into consideration. One that hits me awfully good. I like our entry number 60 out of heat number 3 to go ahead and be our champion age sow. I like her a good deal here. For reserve in this division, another one that hit me awfully hard in their respective heat, and one of the earlier ones we saw come through. I like entry number 50. That's the big powerhouse blonde sow there, and one we liked a whole lot just in terms of spread and dimension there. We call her sound enough and comfortable enough there. She runs into just kind of a workhorse ahead of her in terms of one that's just somewhat of a freak for this age in terms of comfort and flexibility, and I think maybe that kind of separates these two in my mind at least. But still, undeniably, a beautifully maintained, awesome featured, big spreaded, heavy-duty type of sow here that lands in reserve. Congratulations to her. Very good and very unique type of breeding piece. For third out, I like our other division winner there. That'd be entry number 57. And I guess comparatively to the two above her, gives up just a little bit for me in terms of forearm and front foot size and feature. Not quite as burly, but still very good in terms of body composition, power, and design. Very good heat here. Very good group of age sows. Congratulations to all those exhibitors.